Hello!
Hi, Zach. I'm so glad to connect with you. So we have Zach today, and he not only channels, but his background is big in teaching and gathering information from all different angles humanity has to offer, or the universe has to offer. And yeah, he approached us after seeing some podcasts and was interested to share his experience. So, Zach, you're, I always say you're very young, and I'm so glad to see young people, walking this path, which is not very easy, right, in these times. But, Zach, please, where would you say your journey started? When did you realize that the reality we are shown is just a little piece of the whole cake?
Uh,
Was there
thank
a key moment or?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you. And I stumbled across your work and it just got so excited. And I've been trying to reach out and connect with more beings and really love the energy. So thank you so much. And thank you for the compliment. I do look at, I'm probably older than most people think, but still super, super young at heart. But the first memories go very, very far back, like to some of my earliest memories ever as a young child, and being there either at night or in bed and like, Mom, why are we here? Like I could just energetically see this life of like, oh, go to school, which I did not want to do as a kid. I petitioned hard in the third grade to convince my parents I'm done with this process. I've seen what it has to offer. No, thank you, you know? And so seeing like get a job, family die, like there seemed to be something that I always knew was missing. And my poor mother, an angel of a being, I don't think knew how to relate or explain or offer what it is. So that kind of feeling goes way back, and definitely a sensitive being. So yeah, early on. And that didn't make me a saint throughout my life, but it did make me a seeker in many ways, you know? Yeah.
And so, would you say that your parents were very supportive of that you were seeking outside of the system, or did you run into issues with them, where they tried to,
Sure.
put you into a box and say, "Look, Zach, that is your box. You need to stay in there," you know?
No, I came at a really interesting time, and I'm curious if other people could relate. So my mom comes from like an Irish Catholic background, my dad from a Russian Orthodox Judaism. So when they met, like it was a big clash, and they had both kind of disconnected from the more religious. So what they said growing up was like, you need something, boy. Like you need some sort of structure, but they didn't necessarily have the interest or ability to like satiate how much I was. It's kind of funny how generations go, right? So they were very open to me drawing from all sorts of sources, and some of them very positive and good, like Buddhist and Taoist and meditation. My mom got me into yoga, but honestly, some of the journey was like drugs and disconnecting from reality, because sometimes when it's not super clear shown all the path, like I think some people can relate that it could go a few different ways. So there was definitely that process. They were not supportive of drugs, by the way, but of exploring and being open.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it supportive, but also there wasn't too much they could do about it. I've always kind of been a wild spirit in a way, if you can relate, you know?
yeah.
So
So, I mean, you just mentioned drugs. So, did you have a phase in your time in your life where you were actually experimenting with drugs because, you know, reality was too far away for you or too different from what you felt inside of you? Was drugs ever an issue for you?
Ye- Yeah, it definitely was for a part, to be honest. And I think it was because like I hadn't learned how to breathe a certain way or live a certain way or feel engaged or like life was worth it enough. So in some ways, and like just tuning into the bigger picture and learning more about cultures and things. It's sometimes plant medicine when it's like guided and structured and there for healing and like prescribed, in a way that it can be very powerful. And I kind of grew up through an age where like everything's available and not everything is super like you don't have all the masters there teaching the ways. So that was a part of it. And I think ultimately with all those things, like they might say, oh, your problem are drugs, but really it's inside you. There's something deeper there, like you said, like that you're searching or looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you experience your, your peers like your age? Did you connect with these kids your age, or did you felt like you're the odd one out, or how was that experience?
Dude, I mean, in a lot of ways, like I'm fairly personable. I can get along with a lot of different types of people, and even as I grew my spiritual communities, I still like to be. I believe in meeting everyone where we are, right? That's
Mhm.
so. But definitely a little bit of an oddball out in a lot of circles and groups, and can think of times where, yeah, that was definitely a little bit of a case. But I tend to keep like small circle of friends in general.
Yeah.
So people that know you, and even if they're different, they accept you fully, like that kind of thing.
Okay. And
Yeah.
would you think that, well, you say like, yeah, I'm the same. I would keep very, few people close. And I mean, I always say I know a lot of people, but I got just a few friends. A lot of people say, a lot of us say like, oh, I got hundreds of friends. Like, don't use that word friends so, casually and easily, right? Friends for me has a lot more meaning than just going out and have a drink together, right? So, and when you felt like no one could understand where your thoughts go, I can imagine you being very smart, and you understood certain concepts in a different way. How did you deal with people not understanding you when you were younger?
So that's really interesting. Two parts to that. One is like I think we went through a big phase recently in our globe of like conspiracy theories and like truth and like, whoa, there's all these levels to things and who knows. Like I went through that very early. So part of that kind of process, I looking back, might have been a little bullish in like trying to convince, how do you not see this? What's wrong? This and that, this. But with the more spiritual stuff, it was often more just like wanting to share, like, hey, have you seen this or that? And that was just with a few people, maybe like one or two people in the family, one or two friends. And to everybody else, I've for a long time, I think until recently, I think we have a true awakening on the planet right now.
Oh,
I've kind of kept it a little bit hidden away. Honestly, I got really good at like wearing the cloak,
yeah.
invisibility, and trying to, which does have its merits, but I think we're in a different age now, and so a lot more can come out more easily. I think. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think with internet, I think I always say there's always, some people say like, oh, internet's so toxic and it's bad to use it, but I think everything in the universe is actually neutral, and it's about the intention behind it, right? And I love the internet for the fact that we can connect now. You're in the States, I'm in Switzerland, and there we are in the same space time, right? And that's the beautiful thing about internet, right? So definitely internet would help that awakening process too for humanity. Information does leak, and there's no monopoly really able to control it anymore. So what would you suggest as a former teacher and now spiritual teacher, how to use the internet properly? How do you use it?
God, okay. Great question. And I won't profess to be the expert of this, but I'm happy to share my opinion. And this also might just be tied to very much my personal. But I think in addition to the internet and technology disruptors, we also have this like major identity shifting. And it's almost like our identity, the conscious identity, the collective identity, like if we all share some energy and vibe that connects to, and it has just been like cracked and is shattering on our planet, which in the bigger picture for me, I think is really interesting because I think we live in a time where like to use the internet, to use these ways of communicating to express your truest self, your best self, your highest self, and to connect with others in that frequency,
Yeah.
to me, that is like an ultimate use because I don't think that these things are all necessarily all bad. Like we can release dopamine from them. We can get good chemicals. So if we do that in a good way, then some of these communications can be great and they actually like boost us up and we feel it. So that's probably the ideal in my opinion. And I think we all have so much of a voice. And even with the interconnectedness, my mind is constantly blown on how many billions of people there are and what that means. So I think we haven't even scratched the surface yet of even people who have 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 friends. Like that's this big. There's billions of us and we're technically all connected. So I think that we might see an evolution of what that looks like. And I don't even know if I can imagine it fully, but using it to connect more, to share yourself out more, and to just live bigger and more collective, more connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you're a healer and teacher, right? So I would love to know how you've got from teaching in the, state schools and the traditional teaching. How did you make that bridge and now being a spiritual teacher and healer? What were the milestones you went through to
Great
get
question.
here?
So, again, I have to give a lot of thanks to some people in my life that have given me some good advice. Young bucks out there, like I know the old folks don't understand, but sometimes you don't understand, and they have some good wisdom. So, like when I was at the point of like approaching school or kind of college or high school age, like there were a lot of things I wanted to do, like drop out and play music, and I did that. And then I was like, oh, I'll go to school and study agriculture and Sanskrit and be a farming yogi teacher. And some people are like, dude, look, let me give you some practical life advice. Like, get a practical job, do something that's part. So I became a teacher at the encouragement of others, and that actually benefited me a ton. Has been an incredible time. I love the career, I love the job, but at the same time, there were a lot of things that I just pursued in my own life. So on weekends, I might be traveling with Buddhist or Confucius masters. I might be enrolled in a yoga teacher training or teaching evenings. So there was always this kind of undercurrent for me. And I had always known from young that like when telepathy caught on, I'd have to change jobs. So it was like kind of COVID-y time. I was doing a job that wasn't totally in passion or resonance or using me. And they kind of let me go. And I was like, okay, now's the time. And I'm like, let's give this a go. And what was really funny is that I thought that doing this spiritual work would be like, oh, just go out and do healing sessions and this and that. But there was a lot that I had to go through personally to put myself out because I've been so used to keeping that stuff back. And like even using, I have like spirit name I've been given over time. So like using that name versus maybe a birth name, or kind of have a big community that I had from teaching, but I don't talk about this stuff. So even now for me, there's still a building up of a new thing. And I think an evolution of all that coming together. Perhaps I don't really know exactly where all it's going, but there was a time where it just became clear, okay, I'm going to do this. But here's what shocked me is that the guidance I got, and I think maybe there's some people who could relate who maybe later in life go deep into the spiritual path, is to realize that everything that got me here are gifts and skills that I could actually infuse and make even bigger through this kind of work. So my guides had me like, they're like, you need to learn more about business. I was like, what do you mean? Aren't you higher dimensional, higher kind? They're like, yeah, but trust me, it's about your growth personally and connecting to more people. Or you need to go do this, this, and this. I was like, but that's not very like, I'm just gonna grow my own food and hang out. They're like, no, that's. So I did not expect that like even going this way, now it's kind of coming back around and all together. So um, it's a non-linear path sometimes, isn't it? I don't know if your life has been a little non-linear at times, but
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, you
I
can.
was I was in banking for over 20 years, and I mean, now I realize why I've been through that, right? Because obviously, as you say, being creating a business of spiritual teaching and healing is a business, right? And we still deal with 3D, topics like making money, paying taxes, and so on, so on. So all this knowledge we know we need, right? Still to survive in this world. So yeah, I had some funny turns as well in my life. Absolutely. And still, the road is winding. It's still
Yeah.
winding, right? But I mean, fortunately, I'm at a point where, if something bad happens, I know it's a lesson. And it's a lesson I've given myself, right? It's like I always see whatever I face in life is what I've planned out, right? It's like, I don't know how you see that, but I believe here on earth, the free will is limited because so I always think like the soul plan we create is based on free will. But down on earth in 3D, we have like this spectrum we're allowed to go, right? Until then the higher self says, okay, enough. And then boom, right? There's the tower moment coming in. How do you see that?
That's funny. That reminds me of this one line from a book called A Course in Miracles that says the
I love
curriculum you
that book.
take. You love that book, yeah.
I'm just listening it again. I have it as an audiobook too. And I went
It's a
for a
sweet.
walk today. I went for a walk today listening to that book. Oh my God.
Oh, we're on the same page. So you might know the quote that comes to mind. It's very much at the beginning, but it says that this is a required curriculum. You have to complete it, but how long you take is up to you.
Absolutely.
So I think that some things in life are like that. That's been I don't know for certain, but my understanding and what makes sense to me at least is that, yeah, there are certain pillars that we're probably going to end up going through, definitely life lessons. And I think one of the best teachings ever is that like we're responsible for what we create, and to see it that way. And just like even today going through stuff with my partner, I'm like upset at her, but I know in my deep being that it's like, dude, this. What are you not doing right now
Yeah.
that's causing this? Not what is the other person doing, and you know better. So that I think is one of the most powerful turning within and empowering teachings you could have right there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just mentioned you have a partner. So how is your partner? Is your partner's in the spiritual field too, or
Yeah, it's
how does
funny. We
that work?
actually met at a Course in Miracles retreat.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So this was a real gift because I had like prayed for her and done a lot of work in myself to try to bring about someone who truly divinely honored me and I can honor them. And so we have that basis together, which is incredible. But I will say to folks who maybe are like asking for it, and like, look, just because you both have a spiritual foundation, don't mean that it's going to be easy, but it does help a lot because at least you have the same mindset about things. So if we go through a tiff, it might get nasty, but we also both know like, okay, what's the truth here? I'm responsible, and when two people can just take responsibility wholeheartedly for everything they're bringing to the table, whether you're spiritual or not, like I think that's probably essential. But she's a teacher in her own right. She teaches young women empowerment and motivation. She also helps kids get into the top colleges in the world. So she's kind of bridged the teaching world and the spirit as well. It's actually kind of funny that how similar we are. It's funny how that goes. Yeah.
So would you say having a partner with a spiritual mindset like you is still easier though than with being in a relationship with someone that has like doesn't want to do anything with it, right?
Well, I'll say the reason it's easier is that we could go deeper into our work and the work. So in some ways, it's way harder because if somebody's checked out, you're checked out from them and you're not doing the same level of your own stuff because you're like, I know they're not matching me. Like that whole dynamic. But that's valuable too, right? Because that builds us up. But I would say like I'm very grateful every day to have a partner that at least has that foundation and we share it. And the other thing about that foundation is that person truly like loves me, but not in just a romantic way. Like I got to give her a lot of credit. She made this promise at the beginning. It's like, I'm going to love you in the truest sense of it, and I won't break that. And so when that kind of like honor, soul, respect is there at the basis, like I said, it might get crazy and wild. We're both very intense people, but she's always honored that. And that probably makes a bigger difference than I've realized now that I'm saying it out loud.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
So she's still, see, you ahead of me there. I'm single now, so I'm still looking for that.
Bringing it in, huh?
Male, my masculine counterpart, so to say, because for me, one thing is very clear: I could not be with someone who's not on that spiritual journey. I just can't. It's like when I meet people and I feel like there's a shallowness in the energy, I just check out. I just, and this is not, being, trying to be, in a sense of I feel I'm better or something, but I think it would make a relationship so much harder than it already is. And also going into depth. I mean, for me, I want deep connection, and I think you can only have a deep connection if someone's spiritually, open, at least open. I'm not saying has to be where I am, right? But at least have this openness and wanting to learn and open up, in a very how should I say, divine, divine energy, right? It's like this, I don't know. It's like just
I agree, because if we're living it and that's part of your experience, then you want to be able to share that.
all of it.
Another, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all of it.
I feel you.
So my next question, let's come to the channeling, because as we just discussed before, like I have my concerns sometimes, because it's very hard to discern, right? What do I channel here? Is it false light beings, or is it true? Is it really divine light beings? So when was that, in a meditation where you met these beings, or was it like, I don't know, somewhere else? How did that happen, this connection?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So a few things on that. One, I agree with you, and I do think discernment is so key, not just with like channeling, but news, information, health, well, like every single thing right now in these times, like we need discernment is so valuable, right? And sometimes our discernment is spot on and it knows, and sometimes we don't, right? So I also feel that way. And even though I do channeling and put it out and work with a lot of beings, and I've seen tremendous, beautiful, and I've even learned from them incredible things, as like a practical human being, I still like to assess. So to get into my relationship with the particular group I work with the most, I have throughout my life, one of the other things that happened as a child was I would hear guidance instructing me on how to breathe and like shift my energy. When I put my head as a little kid down, I could feel like a heartbeat, but I could tell it wasn't my heartbeat. There was an energy pulsation, and they'd show me how to like balance and shift that. And occasionally in dreams, I might have a dream where like I'm spinning this way and that way, or this way, or doing things like levitating something. And I could feel these like what felt like beings or guides kind of right outside the peripheral. At certain times in my journey, I got into channeling a lot of galactic beings and working with that, and became very open. And actually things started to come in. I'm like, nope, this isn't right. Shut down, clear it out. And I spent most of my 20s and beyond, like studying Buddhist non-dualism, meditating, studying yoga, doing Course in Miracles, working with a lot of these texts, because I do believe that like if you can sustain and know how to enter into a state of love, a state of connection with source, beyond what all the chat and information is, like that at least for me has been very profound, very important. So in my work now, even at first I was like, oh, am I talking to this being or this being and this? And very quickly, like all that just kind of got shattered. And even the information comes in and says, look, all is one and one is all. And there's all of it going on. And I can tell when I'm at different states, like the amount of information and how it comes in is affected. So you know right there that the channel can affect it, right? But also I've worked with it enough. How it came out is actually I was at a point in my life where I wanted deeper friendships, relationships. And it was around the time of calling in my current partner. And I was like, I've had some cool experiences, met many masters and teachers, but I wanted, like, honestly, I was a little bored, or like, I felt like human beings could not give me some of what I wanted in connection. And I knew that they were out there, but I was kind of isolated at the time and like didn't have a lot of community. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the higher realms and I'm going to start building relationships. And I just sat on my couch, very disciplined when I want to be. And every day for like a long period of time, I try to connect with these energies, not just like voices, but states of love, states of excitement. And little by little, I could hear it and sense it, but it took a lot of practice to be able to speak it coming out. And so what has come out of this is a connection. I use the word Xoltal that was given to me, and I had to look it up. It's a Mayan word that means like reverence. So the energy that I connect with and the kind of bigger beingness is like upliftment. It's all about stay uplifted. The main message that always comes through is like stay uplifted. It's a high vibe. But I've seen them answer a lot of questions, and I've seen them, do a lot of shift and healing. And I've even asked some questions, and I'm like, okay, if you know this and this and this that I can't know, then will this verify this? But at the end of the day, like that kind of trickery and stuff, I think is part of what you're talking about. Everything is coming in. So I was literally on a call right before this where someone was saying, ultimately we got to choose source above all.
Yeah.
Connection to divine. That's ultimately it, right? Yeah. And so I enjoy playing in these realms, and I consider myself a bit of a scientist of the realms of consciousness and frequency identification and verification. In my training in energy healing, we do client intake, we do follow-up, we like verify, we check long-term, like all these things, the teacher in me, the program, like you want to see the system, make sure it works, right? So I do bring a lot that too. And I'm so glad you brought up that topic, because again, in a time where it's like, oh, I'm channeling this group and this group and this is Jesus and this is, I even have a book on channeling Jesus, and sometimes I'm like, man, is this really it? But I take it from the practice of like, I'm trying, I'm exploring, and I'm attuning, and everybody listens has got to attune too. But when I've seen them work with individuals and shift lives and perspectives, that's what blows my mind the most.
Beautiful. Yes,
Yeah.
I totally agree. When I work one-on-one with clients, and just usually after the session they feel so much better already, and have an optimism that they haven't had for a long time. Or the other, I don't know, months back, I had a client who tried traditional therapy for 9 months, and he said, like, I changed like 3 times within 9 months, and you're the first one that could take my anger away. It's like none of these sessions with therapy could take my anger away. And here I am as a spiritual teacher, taking all the anger, and can teach how to deal with anger when it comes up, because I believe we should not suppress any feelings. We have to allow them, accept them, and then deal with them in a proactive way. Let's say, so I always say, like, there's healing and there's mitigation. And a lot of people, I think, confuse mitigating negative feelings with healing. But I always say, if you heal properly, then you are aware of your negative feeling, but you don't let that feeling define your action.
Oh, and that's so much of what you just said was so good. But I love that, like, sometimes, like, especially in the more spiritual, it's like, oh, just follow your feelings. But sometimes the feelings, just like Channel B, they can be a little misleading. You don't want to go where that feeling wants to go ultimately. So being able to hear it, understand it, but then also work with it. And I'm curious too, because something that's been big on mine lately in trying to like distill what I see happening in some of these channeling, these healing processes is one, I think that there's a new level of healing that's kind of evolving. Like if you study the history of psychology or the sciences, it's one generation taking the next. And I feel like we're making some really interesting ones that combine the sciences, that combine the mentality, the meditation, the prayer, the higher frequencies. Like Is this something you're observing too? Do you think we're in a period
Totally.
of an evolved form of healing happening?
Totally. So
Yeah.
when I look back on, how when I started looking into, just being a bit interested, but still like, oh, from a distance, it's
Yeah.
maybe 2012, 13 when I started to look into this. And I felt like it was all about, oh, healing means every day you feel light and you feel happy. And I was like, how is that possible? It's like, why? There must be something you're suppressing, because that's not what the human being does, right? I mean, we got the ego that is absolutely, controlling society at this point, right? And everyone's like, ego death, ego death. It's like, no, we need the ego. I think ego has something good too. All we need to do is understand the ego, right? Why it pops up. I compare it with an alarm system.
Ah,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like buying a new alarm system and then having it on the highest level, and then realizing, oh, why does my alarm go off when a wind comes, right? So you start understanding the alarm system, and then you can attune it to what you want it to be, right? But you are in control of it. So that's the way I see. And now, as you say, it's like now really people come and start seeing, no, the polarities are given in 3D on Earth, right? They are here. And it's not about getting rid of the dark. It's about the balance, because the dark, we need the dark as much. How you want to see the light if there's no dark, right?
Yeah.
So it's the balance, right? It's bring everything into balance. And also it's interesting you brought it up, because I think one of the biggest first ever spiritual teacher there was Carl Jung. Have you heard of Carl Jung?
Oh yeah, I studied him quite a bit. I was
Oh
very
yeah, really?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Looking at his stuff, he's been a spiritual teacher. He took the his background, and actually was, for me, one of the first spiritual teacher I'm aware of.
I love that you said, because like he took so much, but he brought so much more. Yeah, definitely a little bit ahead of his time. I think we still have
Totally.
stuff to learn and open from him, and I feel like we're almost in a new Jungian age in a way, because we're taking not just the dream, but the consciousness and like the higher, all of that, and adding that into the mix too, right? Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, but I totally agree. The healing and the spiritual teaching is taking, well, it's shifting, right? It's like
Yeah.
you have this collective now who's like on a, hit the first milestone, and now it's the next.
Yeah.
And it's bigger, actually. It compiles everything now, right? It's like bringing these pieces together now.
It's so big, and I think we're evolving back to like that. I was talking to an acupuncturist the other day, and they were talking about like the ultimate acupuncturist master. It's like the Wu Wei. They can put the one needle in and it unravels everything. But because people want the complication and the ego, they're like, we got to put a bunch just to keep you engaged in the healing process. But I'll tell you, I have this vision of a healer in every home, and it's not mine, but I've adopted it, and agree with it, that like I think we're dawning into an age where enough people are open and can be taught to like enter into these healing states. Maybe what you might call a channeling state, maybe not channeling, but being able to do really transformative work in that. And so I love what you said, that like, oh, people come in for therapy, but you add this component and it's so much bigger. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Wow,
So,
what a joy.
um, what do you guys say about what's happening right now with humanity? I mean, and what I would like to do, go really specific, is this transgender confusion.
Wow.
They start at school with the little kids, and I think it's very wrong. I think it's nearly it's violence. For me, it's taking something to a level where it can only go wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know how you see that. Maybe I'm too
Well,
harsh with that.
yeah, so I could answer the first part and then the second, and the first part more from like, I'll it's not directly related to your question, but in general, what the guidance I've been getting lately is saying what is coming through is, one, to do this like the 3 to 5D is kind of what we call it. They say building up the core, whatever the best parts of the 3D are, but this is super important. And I think for a lot of us, it's just like, oh, I just want to jump into the light body and this. And they're like, look, we're here taking this and elevating it up, and we're drawing this down, and this is our time right here. This is our time to integrate. This is the time we're at, which is taking the best of the 3D and the whatever we can starlight, receive down from the higher realms and integrate. They also have been saying something else a lot lately, which is people's hearts and minds are far more open than they've had the experience yet to adopt to. So that means that like a person you might see and you might think, oh, they're not really that open. They might want to be way more than they even know how to yet. And so what I think, now my guides haven't actually specifically, somebody might have asked about transgender and that whole thing. I don't remember offhand what they said, but I could share from my perspective and see if anything comes through, is that I think in the big picture, like I said, we are moving it into a more open, accepting identity but we've got so much anger in our society and guilt and shame and blame, and that stuff, I won't use it explicit, but it makes people do the nastiest things. And so I think what we see infused into something that's actually like, from my understanding, my partner Kate is much more studied on the research and the numbers. She's so great at like, she'll learn everything, and I'm a bit more Aquarian. I'm like, but my understanding is that the number of people who might really, really have an identity crisis and really need something to open up. And again, as we said, there's always something much bigger than just this one issue. If this is your one issue, chances are there's a whole lot more. And so giving that a holistic opportunity to come out, it doesn't look like we've quite achieved that. And with all the guilt and shame and blame that's still getting healed and resolved, it like pinches the whole thing. Like you said, that violence, like it can bring an intrusive, a pushing, a pulling, yeah, I've heard stories of some of the stuff that's going on to kids that kind of makes me cringe. In the same way that if you were a healer and you knew that you could resolve something because you've had experience with it and you've seen it, and you see somebody cutting somebody's like, you know, tumor out with a knife and they're bleeding and it's hard. It's just like, oh God, is this the best we can do? Hold on. Let's breathe, let's open. And so to me, that's the feeling. Like, we're doing it, humanity, but there is still some like patches where we could be a little barbaric. It's not just there, it's like the amount of stuff that has to go into our phones and the human experience that's around mining some of that. I've seen more of that lately. So there's a few pockets where 3D, it can be a little violent. It can be very violent. And I know you said we incorporate the whole, so I'm a very optimistic person. So my hope and my vision and healing is that all this will evolve. It'll give time to breathe, but to judge it on a snapshot of now, maybe not our highest light representation of humanity. So maybe real, you know? So I don't know if you have more to add on that, but those are my kind of thoughts and experience. As I said, Xoltal doesn't tend to get as much into they'll get into details in private sessions. What they always say is, if you're vague with us and your questions, we're going to be vague back with you.
Yes.
So get specific. But when I do channelings and in public, it's generally like, stay uplifted, all these energies, all these opportunities. It's really focusing on that a bit more from what they've brought through.
Beautiful. So so you say you have this information from different beings, right? Is there how should I say, a star family that you feel a deeper connection? So for me, it's, for instance, the Arcturians.
Oh, I love that you said that. So it's funny you mentioned Arcturian. When I first like kind of cracked open to the cosmic stuff, my learning like started on the world's religions and histories, and then I learned about the galactic histories and the longer history of Earth. So that was fun as a teenager to find out. And one of the first beings that really came through a lot to me were the Arcturians, through art, through a lot of stuff like that, through a lot of information sciences, artistic. So like do like little drawings and things and
Oh,
start
wow.
beings on
That's
them.
Lemuria. Did you know that's Lemuria?
Okay, so Lemuria is another one that really connects with me.
Well, the
That
Arcturians, I don't know, do you know? So in Lemuria, it was prominently the Arcturians who tried to bring, civilization to the next level.
oh, okay, that connects so much with me. I love that. Okay, so that was a big one early on. I love a lot of Pleiadian energy. I feel very heart, but I'll tell you more recently, I had a very interesting experience connecting with the Lyran energy, which for me,
Byron,
the
yeah.
channel I work with a lot of beings, but that one felt very weird. And I had a really interesting experience. Quick story, my mother passed. Like I said, an angel of a woman. It was during the COVID. It was a very tough thing. She had Parkinson's towards the end of her life. I wish I knew about healing what I knew, what I know now.
Yeah,
Back then.
I'm sure.
Uh, so, but I started to get messages from her, and you talk about like, do I believe this? How much is really true? I'm just gonna say it. Like, let's just pretend it's true for a moment so we could get the good vibes from it and absorb the good vibes, and then you could assess like that stuff in a minute, It started to come through. She's like, look, I sit like one of my higher aspects is on one of the Lyran councils. I have information to share with you. I want you to channel these activations, these light activations. And so it was like really weird because here I am. I know it's my mom's essence. But she's not behaving as if my mom was. It's like it's another being, but I know a connection. And so like channeling your mother, whose other aspect is on a Lyran High Council, and you're doing light body activations for humanity, like that's been really interesting. And so what is that? Like, how do we really know? In my feelings and connections, like it connects to a healing energy that I know is beautiful and true. To what extent all of these things, but at the same time, it's the downloads I get. So that's been a really interesting process, and it's helped me heal and connect to the Lyrans lately in a whole new way that I hadn't really been able to previously. So in a way, it kind of healed and open. But
I think
connected to star families, those two, and then my understanding is we have a blueprint of all of them. So we kind of have antenna array to connect at different times. So the whole family, man, I feel very much like a world cosmic traveler. Like I've done a little time here, done a little time here, but that's kind
no,
of
I totally believe as well. It's like, we've been, so the way I received my information about humanity is really, they were the cedar races. So
yeah.
she's, I mean, I would, so the connection I made then was like the cedar races, the 12 tribes of Israel, basically. And if you look at those symbols, they very much in line with the 12 zodiac signs we have, right? And with their being, so we are all of them, and we've been all of them, right? I mean, we complete this cycle on this earth, right? But coming with the energy of all the 12, right? But what the way I see it is the Arcturians is probably the last time. So that was my last incarnation before I became an earthling. Let's put it that way. And interesting is, so Sid um, channel found this connection between, for instance, the Asian race is a lot of Asians are actually incarnation of Arcturians. And it's interesting because you've been in Buddhistic temples, right? You have this connection to Asia. So it makes a lot of sense that Arcturians were the first, group.
So interesting you mentioned that because I definitely had an Asian lifetime before this one. And I think a lot of people did, especially in some of that, well, without getting into all the backstory of that. But that's really beautiful. I'm learning some interesting things, and that connects for me.
And
Yeah.
also, I mean, out of the 12 tribes, right, they spread. So the only tribe we're speaking about at this point is the tribe of Judah. But apparently all the other tribes, they just went all over the,
All
and
over.
there is one tribe that went to Asia and they're coming back now. It's like that, you know. I mean, I've seen a documentary about this where this Jewish guy, I will share that with, I will send you that documentary. Is beautiful. He went to the, to really to Israel, and then started to go and find out what happened to the other tribes.
Wow. Wow.
And he found them all over the world. The
Wow.
tribes are all over the world.
God.
Right?
You know, I gotta say, it's like, because I started off teaching in history, I was fascinating with the history of the world, and especially like early on, I learned about these lineages on the planet, and I'd be going, I'd start studying them academically and finding, and then you learn about all these ancient civilization. I have a lot of connection. I studied a lot of like Mayan archaeology and astrology, the galactic mind, but also the pyramids and stuff, and you see so many things from all over the planet that are connected to Egypt, to this. And then we learn that these are just mirrors of other places. Like my guides have often said to people, they're like, I think I'm in Egypt. They're like, actually, you're in a whole nother system. They just have some similarities. And so that to me is so fascinating, so beautiful. And I think there's a lot of joy. Again, like what's the benefit of knowing this stuff is, from my perspective, there's a lot of joy knowing that there are these high vibrations within our civilization, within our history, and it's all building to right now. Like,
It
these are
is.
incredible times. I would have liked to have been around when the pyramids were created. That would be cool to see. That said, we're in some pretty exciting times ourselves these days, you know?
I think we're close to maybe able to build them again,
It feels like that, right?
right?
Yeah.
Or reactivate them, right? For me, they are like activate the portals to me. So so the way I so combining the information you get out there with the information I get from my higher self is really after Atlantis went down, you know, those godlike beings spread all over the globe. And the so Atlantis was, so the Palladius was very prominent in the time of Atlantis, and they had this affinity, you know, they loved the pyramid shapes, so they took that apparently. So, and they took it all over. I mean, you we find pyramids all over the globe, right?
All over the globe. All over the globe.
Exactly. So some went, you know, on really the other side of the globe, but the Egyptian part, where you have this, you know, where you have these godlike beings, like, you know, the Ra group, for instance, right? It's they try to teach humanity actually to become more spiritual, and it didn't work out, so they left again. So that's why, you know, Egypt or Kemet, but you know, it's actually, it was Kemet back then, right? So that teaching got lost. Well, they say they got lost, but it was actually just taken away from us, right? It's still there. I believe, I strongly believe. A lot of stuff is in the Vatican after the, you know, the Library of Alexandria was burned. They just
Oh
took the
yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
The good stuff they took, right? The good stuff is still in the Vatican. I strongly believe.
It's
So,
so funny. I had a funny synchronicity I didn't realize at the time, but I'm originally from Washington, D.C. And at one point I lived in Alexandria. It's right nearby in Virginia. And I lived
are you
literally
kidding
right
me?
underneath. What's
I
that?
know people in
You
Alexandria.
know, okay, so listen, there's a place called Old Town Alexandria,
Mhm.
and at the top of it is the George Washington Masonic Temple.
Mhm.
It's just drive up Old Street, it's right there. And so I lived right underneath that. And what I found out later was that it was actually modeled on the temple, or the one of the components of the Library of Alexandria. So you talk about these interesting synchronicities that come up in our lives. I'm like, wow, I'm literally living under like a Masonic temple that combines George Washington, the libraries of Alexandria, Washington, like there's a lot there. And I think it's interesting because that energy was encoded in the planet. It's in the water, it's in our DNA. And so these times that we're in now where it's becoming activated, Like I remember reading in the Law of One. I don't know if you've come across
Oh,
that
I
text.
love that. I love
I love that book. So they say in there that like the pyramids served their purpose. They were to stabilize the planet, and they didn't really get into like, oh, are we supposed to reactivate them? But I do think there is like a new level of activation that involves not just the pyramids, but all the earth gridding work that people are doing these days, the power that we can create them. And maybe this is what you mean. There's a lot of groups that are doing this and beings, and it's fascinating. It's really powerful what we're doing. And
Absolutely.
part of the reason I wanted to reach out to you and to connect, whoever's watching this, reach out. I want to connect with you too, is that my guides keep showing me that we have no idea how big 8 billion is, how many people are actually awakened and open. And the more we can connect and live in these rooms, like that's the next level internet, right? Is the realm of consciousness. And I think that's another one where like, we're probably not on the cusp. We're immersed in it and maybe more than we know, right? So
Absolutely.
being able to download, being able to bring these through, like I imagine in your work, like a lot of what you do to help people is probably coming from connected to some of these vibrations, right?
Absolutely. So I always say, like, for me, the Akashic record is the original World Wide Web, right? It's like
Yes.
the web, the internet, like it's a copy of the Akashic record, right?
So
And
true.
it's about tuning into the right station. It's like, for me, it's like tuning into the, TV station or radio station, or, having your smartphone, and it has an app on it, and the app connects to a certain database. And that's what I do with my senses, right? So mostly when I work with people, it's I clear my channels first, and then I just let it happen. And I just mention things, and people go like, "Oh my god!" It's like exactly that, and it's like, where it's impossible you could know about this. How
Yeah.
you do that? And I was like, I don't know. It just comes to me. So the way I see it's like I feel it in my gut. So my sacral chakra receives it, and then it travels up. So then my solar
Okay.
plexus um, gives me an indication of that's right. And then my heart, when my heart says on top of my solar plexus, is like, yes, I can validate that, you know, with love and peace, then I can speak it out. So it travels through, so the energy travels through me.
Interesting. Mine tends to, I'm thinking as you said, it tends to come down from the higher, and then it kind of hits this geometry, like into
Yeah.
the heart and around. And if that resonates, then I am wholeheartedly in. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. And you had asked about how do we know, right? Like knowing if you know is such a beautiful power to be in, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always say, so very simple. I say, if your heart responds with peace, then you know.
Yeah. And
Then you know.
what's funny is like, who's ultimately to say what's right or not and what's right at any given time. So I'd love to just encourage folks who are exploring this to have some joy with it, have some lightheartedness, and also incorporate some learning. Like I've found in myself, like when I'm connecting to something, I'm channeling, I'll often go and try to learn what I can about it too. And then that gives my more structure. And it might dissolve some of the things I've learned, or that learning might build up and hold up more. So I think that that's kind of like an interesting, all in one
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. And what would you say about people, how should I say that we live in a simulation?
I'm sorry, a what?
In a simulation, it's like a lot of people talk about this matrix, and this is a simulation. And
Well,
how do you go about this?
yeah, I mean the original, the old Sanskrit word is Maya, right? It's an illusion. It is an illusion, but I think that people who say it's a simulation, their only concept of how that could work is that it's some computer or robotic, right? Because we have a long-standing history, well, not that long, but of seeing the world through a mechanized universe as a mechanical thing. We have so much computers, but wait till the computer interface is consciousness based, and we can store the information, we could already store it in crystals. You could store it in the 0 point energy, right? So when you're tapping into it at that level, then you might have a different frame and concept of like, oh, maybe we're living in a consciousness simulation. And I'm like, yeah, probably, possibly. And my guide said something interesting once about this that stuck with me. And they said, what does it mean that it's an illusion? It means that you could shift it, change it, interact with it. It means that it could become
beautiful.
And so the absolute truth, that realm, you can't change it. It just is. But illusion doesn't need to be bad, or simulation doesn't mean to be bad. It just means that it's shiftable, it's changeable, it's the many, and that my spiritual process has definitely taken me from extremes and like hard beliefs to and wanting to get out of here, wanting to just escape, wanting to like meditate my way, happy way, yoga my way off the planet and now I've realized, oh no, that's not the way you're getting through anything. One, I don't think life ends ever, regardless of what form it's in. I think it's an eternal process, so get comfortable with that. And also just adopting this, like you were saying, easier appreciation for all, understanding of it all. So I do believe that at some level there's, what do I think? Is it a simulation? I think our truest state is probably something in an observer state. Like we might be more like just awareness or observation. I think that, and that what we're observing, that puppy's a wild simulation. Super. So I think that might be more it, that we aren't necessarily living in a simulation as we are observing ourselves within one.
I love that.
How's that, right? Yeah.
Observing as simulation rather than living in a simulation.
Yeah.
I love that.
And our lives are like video games, I swear, because when we go through a shift, I'm sure you felt this, like all the rules change in the game, like the levels, the character. So I do feel sometimes like the computer games are a bit of a, you fail a mission, you respawn and you start again, right? Just like it's exactly. So there are some correlations to these things that are interesting. Yeah.
Totally, absolutely. I love that. So now looking at your path, what do you see, so for me, for instance, I was giving this vision of this healing center,
Yeah.
And I have all sorts of, ideas about it. So now there you are a teacher, you're a healer. What is the mission? A lot of people said, what is the mission? Do you have a bigger mission where you know exactly where you want to go? Or are you at this point where you just go like, okay, I go with the flow. I see what's coming up.
Great question. So one, I think that there is a blueprint for the new earth. I do think, and I agree, my guides are often saying it's like the new earth already begun. We're just very much at the peak of it, which means it has a ton of potential, maybe not as much implementation. So, sorry, I got sidetracked. Repeat your question for me one time. I was about to go off to a whole nother, remind me again.
I know, happens to me. So basically, right now you do this healing and teaching sessions.
Oh, the bigger mission. Yeah. So, like my charts are Aquarius with double Capricorn. So like I'm very much visionary, but I also like to work and push and move towards things. So my connection to the Earth blueprint has always been felt like there's going to be many nodes around the planet that are connected, healing centers, communities, towns, friendships, and that there would come a time where I'd be able to live and network between them, almost like having many homes. Because I also did a lot of farming. I wanted to be in agriculture and I love growing things, but I learned like you can't travel and go speak all the time and also have a thriving farm, like and grow food, or raise, well, maybe you could do family, right? It takes a community, it takes a village. Yeah. So my bigger world I'm trying to help create and live in is one of these that's interconnected. There's these high frequency centers. We're connected to them. Maybe it's not full commune level, but there is this vibration and frequency. But my true passion is helping people like uplift their life as a teacher, like gain the skills as a teacher and a coach. Like My superpower is pushing people. Like, I will grab your hand and jump off that cliff and fly with you. Like, let's go. So this kind of work to help build everybody up. And what I'm realizing more and more is that, like, it's very much a combination of like, hey, look, you need to get your finances together and figure out how you're contributing and how are you going to make money, and not to be like non-spiritual about it, but how are you going to contribute and how is there going to be an exchange of this? Like, you got to figure these out. And we could all do so many things, some of us, that to be focused. So guiding people in this, the helping with the spiritual, the channeling, all of this is kind of the bigger umbrella of it, but really helping people practically figure out and also get motivated and get the discipline and, you know, a lot of background in teaching. So my passion is in that. I like that role. I like learning. I like teaching. And so this is very much how I connect to kind of the bigger vision, the bigger planetary thing. I bought a piece of land in Arizona that started as a desert reforestation project. I wanted to reforest a plot of the desert. But now I'm getting guidance that, like, this should also in time be an advanced healing center and using the best and the brightest. So I have a little bit of a connection to that. But when some people, like you say, like, I need the healing center, I more feel like I want to come to your healing center, hang out, and then go to the next healing center. Like, that's kind of it for me personally, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so interesting because, you know, when I speak to my friend in upstate New York, she has the farm and the land within, and so that's where we start with the first. I always say, I point always out to her, it's like, that's the first one, you know, but there's going to be a lot more. But I
I
have
think
this
so.
vision actually that I have teachers coming in, like having like maybe, I don't know, say, oh, this week Zach is here, you know, and Zach brings this, you know, and then people would come and connect with your energy.
Yeah.
But also, do I have other teachers where it's like, I want you to come as well, and, you know, offer your energy to the community there, and hopefully we can take this, you know, around the globe, right? It's really building that new grid, the
Yes.
light grid, right? And that's what we try to do with this podcast too. It's like, you know.
Yes, you do. Yes, you're growing it, you're reaching. And I really want to emphasize to everybody, because I don't think we hear this message enough. There is a planetary awakening happening. Believe me, folks. And if you don't believe me, experiment. Go take a poll of all the people around you. Have you become more open-minded, more open-hearted in the last few years? Then yes, this is an awakening, and it's global. There's billions of people going through it. So I think sometimes the old mentality of like, oh, who's going to go to all the healing centers? Who's going to use all these? Like, we're evolving into a civilization that values this, and we're going to go through a period of a civilization that needs it.
Oh,
Just
I mean,
back to what you were talking about earlier. One example of like a topic going on in civilization that could use a lot of holistic healing. You know?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would, you know, I hope people don't get me wrong about this transgender thing, right? I truly believe some people probably feel like they're born in the wrong body. But the trend I see right now is like, okay, instead of trying to understand my darkness, I change my gender, and hopefully everything's gonna be solved, right? But that's not gonna happen, right? It's when you see these people, and I'm talking about the ones that lack, you know, purpose, and feel like non-seen, non-heard, and have the wrong attention, they end up with exactly the same thing, right? They end up fighting for attention, wanting to be heard, wanting to be seen, but it's not going to change who they are inside of them, right? So instead of doing the healing work, they feel like, oh, quick fix.
Yeah.
But I always say there's no shortcut. There is no shortcut to this. You have to go through all that darkness, and you have to understand all the darkness.
The good news is, because there is no shortcut, regardless of what people are doing now, it's gonna push itself out. It'll come out. It might take a little longer. And this is what I mean. All this stuff that we're trying to shortcut now, that we're trying to cut off, that we're trying to force down, no way. It's all coming up, and out. And you remind me as you're saying, and I can feel your heart and your love and your compassion, that both me and my partner, like I always felt I'd go back to in-person classroom teaching of the young and youth. I loved teaching high school. It was either high school or kindergarten when I was trying to decide. I feel there's such a similarity actually, but to offer, if kids had the communities and the environments that valued them, that gave them their support, that gave them their fostering, their pushing, like all of these things, I think we'd experience such a different thing. Because yeah, a lot of people feel uncomfortable in a lot of ways coming to planet Earth. My guides are always joking. They were like, we were there with the clipboards trying to read you the fine print, and the star seeds were just like, I can do this, I'm gonna be great. And then you get here and you're like,
oh crap, what did I do?
oh, I didn't read the fine print. This is hard. You know. But I think we went through the hardest times, I think.
Yeah, no, for me, as a friend of mine, we joke as well. It's like, there was like, when it was your turn, right? And up wherever your soul is waiting in the waiting room, right? And there was this, the shortest queue was the one to the earth. So like we go the quick way, right? And now we understand why the queue was the shortest, because it's so damn hard. But also I believe it helps to complete those karmic cycles, and then actually help your soul to ascend. I always say we have an ascension in this physical body, but we always also have an ascension on a soul level.
Well, something along that note that I think also is good for people to get reminded of is that, there's the earth ascension. There's beings that have been on the earth many times, and many of us, even though we're galactic, we've also had a round or two or 3,000, who knows. But there's this evolution, and then there's the star seed frequency that's come in to uplift. And I think sometimes there's so much talk about ascension and like, are we going to make it? Like, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to come down and assist and to help. And so this to me is like, I just say that as a reminder to anybody who's connecting to this, like, let's not get too cliquey. Like, we didn't just come to find the other star seeds and just be ourselves. We came to shine our light. We came to connect with many beings. And I think that we all have a way of, again, coming back to people are more open-minded and open-hearted than even they might realize. And that if we adopt this and we connect, then we're not just coming down and shooting back up. We're coming down, we're integrating and blending. And so just this call to like, careful with the clickiness, careful with the cool kids stuff, like keep it humble. And remember the mission. We came to help everyone, not
exactly,
just get back off of what we just jumped into, Yeah.
I'm so grateful you mentioned that. I see this trend also in this starseed community. It's like they put themselves a bit on a pedestal, and I'm not up for that at all. It's like no. I always say we're unique but equal.
Yeah.
Everyone's very unique, and that's beautiful. But on a worthiness level, we are all equal. And I think that's very important.
I think a lot of us could learn, like my dad is a great example. I know we're all divine beingness, but not as like spiritually inclined or this and that, very practical, worked in sales, like, took care of his family and these sort of things. But like, I've had a lot to learn from him. And as I said, even my guides are like, okay, yeah, we're gonna channel higher dimensional stuff, but you got to learn more about infrastructure, global connections. Like there's a lot of worldly things that we have an opportunity to become immersed in and like learn so much and approach things very differently. A lot of starseeds are like, no, that's not really my vibe. I don't want to do that. And I'll encourage them, like, yes, I know it's not your vibe, but like, if you got to step out of your comfort zone, that's not just in the spiritual realm, it's also in the 3D, and it's learning to operate. And I know for myself, my chart said like, hey, if you stop fighting against the system so much and you actually try to learn from it, it's actually going to benefit you overall. And I feel like having partnerships, being less like esoteric necessarily, and some people it's totally aligned for, but just speaking for myself is that like some worldly things could actually help us and
Oh,
take
yes.
the edge off and take the pressure off and the intensity off. And guess who we get to learn that from? People who are really good at worldly stuff, right? So there can be this like exchange a little bit. And I like what you say about not getting too hotty toddy, because there's definitely a cool kids vibe to the star seed.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're also really shiny, beautiful beings, so I understand why it feels that way. But like you say, way to keep us in line, keep it humble, you know.
Absolutely. But it's very interesting because you said you're Aquarius double Capricorn, right? So I am Aquarius, rising Scorpio, and Moon Capricorn. So we're very similar, actually.
Oh, you've got the added depth and the Scorpio in it. Wow,
Yeah.
cool. Oh my gosh, how similar though. You don't meet like a lot of Aquarian caps. I mean, I'm sure there's all combinations of them, but what a fun synchronicity. And the Scorpio, oh, I could see that in you. Oh, it's beautiful.
Can you sense the Scorpio? I don't know.
Well, it's okay. I don't want to offend anybody, but I will say that
I know.
I think that there are evolved forms of all signs. There's like the Scorpio and even the Aquarius that are less evolved, and like the neurotic sides of that are controlling. And it might be like, we're gonna burn this place down, or I'm gonna completely disconnect. And then there's the more evolved, you know, which is like the vision, but also the integration, or the depth of Scorpio, but also the warmth and the temperance to it a little bit. And so I feel in you a like what I call evolved Scorpion or Scorpio. That there, I can sense when you said it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense to me, you know. And so I think anybody who's got their charts going on or gets into that, I love all these like the various types of modalities, the archetypes of from tarot to human design. I studied a lot of Mayan archaeology or astrology. It has that too. But I think that they can teach us a lot about ourselves, and there's definitely something to like the unevolved, evolved versions of all the charts. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that. So the negative, for me, it's kind of like a bit the negative traits of the signs is really that karmic energy we need to work on.
Oh, I like
That's
that.
how I
Yeah.
interpret it as a bit, right? So to become that way, as you said, the evolved version,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I love to mix the stuff. I'm not someone that is like, oh, I just do astrology or I just do human design. I think all of them have these kind of like pieces where we can learn so much more about ourselves, but also not getting attached to it, creating a codependency. So I wouldn't be someone that reads my astrology like, what's today, right? Or what's tomorrow. It's no, that is a dependency again. So
Uh,
I'm more like, I really tell my clients to, it's like, do not depend on me. Don't you dare, to text me tomorrow again. I don't like that, right? It's like, no, 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 no. You don't, I don't want a codependency here, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So how do you deal with clients that can, where you sense like, oh, there could be a codependency, create, starting to build. How you deal with that?
Ooh. Oh man, there's so much depth. And just personally, I've had some experiences. I'm trying to think of how to frame this. Well, the first thing I'll say is that I'm just very grateful because I do channeling as part of my work. That frequency, when I bring in that high one, they have a way of talking to people and addressing things that I could tell. Like they're trying to show me, like, dude, you need to be this powerful. Like you can be this powerful and direct with people. You could correct these things as you sense them, call them and make it big, but make it beautiful and glorious. So I'm very grateful that I like the energies I work with do a lot of correcting that. They do a lot of like putting people in their place, but also propping them up, smacking them around, but pumping them up at the same time. So because the work involves that, however, I will say that when it comes to those relationships, and also because of my own reflective nature and what you were saying earlier, of always turn it on yourself first, like I've noticed that these are places where I realize maybe I'm not operating at the level I need to. And because I'm holding back, maybe it has to do with pricing. Maybe it has to do with the program I'm doing. Maybe it has to do with my mentality, that oftentimes when we get engaged with clientele and things that aren't in resonance, it's generally because we're not going big enough, is my experience. And that if we look at, wow, okay, one, if we only have a few clients, then that tends to happen, versus if we have more, then there's a little bit less of that, right? Because we could start connecting with the people that are in resonance. And if we don't have more, that means that we ourselves can go bigger. And this is the crazy part that I've learned lately, of like the deep, and follow me for a second here, the deep spiritual connection between marketing, sales, visionary, maybe not just business, but your purpose and your life. Because I think you could treat your relationships in this way. You could treat your professional work. You could treat your job, whatever it is, of going bigger. But for healers and channelers and folks working in the services based stuff, I think that for me, that's a sign that like I'm not living in my biggest fullest. So if I just own and I elevate and I shift what I need to, and that might be a moment process, it's likely going to take a couple moons at least to navigate and shift through that. But in my personal experience, that's more the case been what it is, less about the other person and more about how big and full am I stepping into it. And like I said, I have this gauge of channeling where I can tell they're trying to build me up. Like, and I think you feel this way too. There's a way of addressing people with this power, and it's not manipulative and it's not unloving, but it's definitely not meek, you know, and it's a shifting energy. And the more we can channel that through this truthfulness, this honesty, but also support, that tends to kind of heal that along the way, wouldn't you say?
Oh wow, thank you for that. I love that approach. No, I love that. I love that approach totally. Because that's where I'm struggling sometimes. Like, okay, is there something? Is it something I need to give into? Am I too harsh now? You know, it's like, but now you're telling me it's like maybe it is a sign, because I'm some more like kind of like, oh, I don't want to go out and sell myself. I know, people will find me, and those clients I have, that's good the way it is. But also I can feel like I have more space for more clients in that sense. So do I go big first, right? And then the space is taken, or do I stop giving so much to the clients I have right now, and then the space opens up for others? That's I'm at the point where I like haven't figured out quite yet.
This is such a great conversation, and I want to like carry it on for one more moment, because I think a lot of people right now and in the coming times will relate between like wanting to get to this. Do I stop doing this? Do I keep doing this? And then something that you said that is the biggest part of like, you didn't exactly say this, but there's this energy, not necessarily to you, but I think in general within this community, is like, it'll work out. And like, this. And in my experience, and I'll just share this from my perspective, y'all, we can't just rely on like, this. Like, we didn't come here to be like, this. No, we came to be like, whoop, like, we're feeling this, we're elevated, we're going. So if what we were, I can't remember if it was before in our conversation or on here, you talked about converting to action and like putting things into a practice. And I think that we do a little bit of both. And then we just got to crank that dial to 200 sometimes and get way out of our comfort zone, and then get really good at being out of our, and then go bigger. So I think for all of us, like the potential for growth in this area is like here. It's like here. And this is what I meant by like the starseed vibe, learning from the 3D world. And because we do have a propensity to not want to do that, right? To be like, I don't need to. Why? Because we know what can be done. But also we can incorporate all of it. And I think if we're going to have a true global impact, that becoming spiritual marketers, spiritual salespeople, because what is sailing? It's sharing, right? And it's collaborating. And also that if we realize how big the planet is and how many people need healing, that all of our lives could be so much bigger. You know, my partner Kate is always saying, when I look back on this life, I don't want to regret a thing. I don't generally think about it, but she's often saying, like, in a given moment, she'd be like, I need to do this challenging, life-shifting adoption because I don't want to look back and feel like I missed an opportunity here. You know, I want to get the most out of life, which, by the way, is Scorpio and her charts coming through a little bit too. They just want to get the most out of life sometimes, I feel like, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to say again, like to a lot of folks, I think there's this and that, but if the energy you're feeling is like, oh, it'll just kind of have like, let's go bigger. Let's go bigger with that, you know. For what it's worth, again, this is just my take. So take everything with discernment, take what resonates. But if it's inspiring, then yes.
No, you totally inspire me. Absolutely. I love it. I love it.
Oh, I love it. Love it, Jew.
So now a lot of people speak. I want to go into religion just quickly because I think so. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in Jesus. And as a teacher, not as someone comes to save us. So a lot of people think that. Hold on, I need to plug my thing in. So you hear all these religious people saying, "Oh, the second coming of Jesus," and I always say, "There's no second coming of Jesus. The second coming of Jesus is us becoming Christ consciousness, us choosing Christ consciousness versus, Antichrist, right? There's no Antichrist either coming. It's all in us. It's the dark and the light, and we choose." What would you say about this?
God, I love this topic. We could have a whole long one, so I want to try to give my best here to this because my personal philosophy has always been like I like to meet people where they are, you know, and I feel it's easier to go deeper into somebody's current framework sometimes than it is to eliminate it and give them a whole new one, right? Sometimes, because eventually they are going to start it's either going to open up this way or go this way. So for me, studying the religious texts as someone who is seeking and like, curious and wanting to know, and like that whole idea of life doesn't come with the manual too. There are an abundance of manuals in every language on every continent, I mean, do they all work and do they all line up? No, they don't. So that for me was always like, for me personally, like pull from this, pull from this, pull from this. However, this individual that we identify as Jesus and then the Christed energy, for me, is I've always felt a deep connection to. Like I was drawing pictures of Jesus as a young kid that I didn't even know the story of his life, that I found out later was like his baptism and things that I was like, oh, that's pretty mystical. So I've always been looking for things that talk about Jesus from either the old History Channel, was he real, to the most esoteric texts. Like one of my favorite texts on Jesus is Yogananda's book, The Second Coming of Christ. And it's a 2-volume set. I love it. And some of the yogis, they talked about Jesus from a very different perspective than maybe the Europeans did, right? And the different religions. So Jesus never really said the second coming of Jesus. It was the second coming of Christ, right? And so I could very much connect with you that this Christed frequency, this Christed energy, that this, to me, my context with it is like, this is the source shining into reality. This is the light. This is the bridge. This is us. This is, there's so much to it. And so that, to me, it's interesting, has always been a very beautiful connection. And I've spent my mom had the Catholic upbringing, so I had a little exposure, though. We went to like a Universalist church growing up with the lesbian preacher, so that was like a slightly different context. But I got in trouble in all religious environments I've been in because I try to pull the threads, and I'm like, wait, but this doesn't add up with this. And like, what's the heart of this? Whether it was in a synagogue teaching or whether it was in the temples or whether it was in this and that. And so I've always been trying to pull on the threads. And I think the way you described it is that the coming of Christ and energy, that this is here, this is really what it was about, that that's thread that the more I pull, the more beautiful golden light just pours into me. So I haven't found the like discrepancy quite yet personally in that one. But like I said, my first book was like channeling Jesus and connecting with him and his energy. But again, there's so many Jesus energies. And so that's one I think that kind of gets twisted sometimes and this and that, and why like I opened up to as a personal thing. And this is another funny thing that like a lot of Christians will be like, no, you can't channel because that's the devil's work. And I'm like, wait, you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ who speaks to you regularly, and you're starch sent against channeling. You realize like your connection to Jesus, that's what we're talking about, is channeling. How do you know it's real for yourself? You know, so this is a hilarious thing. And me personally, I like to laugh at things, including some of the most sensitive topics. I'd rather laugh than cry or get angry at it.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's a funny one to me, you know, that even people who read A Course in Miracles, but they won't read anything else channeled. And I'm like, you know, this book is channeled. Or they read Course in Miracles and then they become completely religious about it, which to me is more closed off, more, it's almost like you're holding on to something and you lose the essence, right? The practice, the heart of it. And that said, I've spent some time with some Muslims who are beautiful, holy people. I've spent times in evangelical churches with God loving, like bring tears to my eyes thinking of them. Buddhist temples, you know. I'm trying to think how many atheists I've met that warm my heart. I've definitely met a lot of Gnostics.
Yes.
You know, and I think that there's a lot of expressions, and I'm curious for the upcoming ones. I wonder if like religion really is going to become like a kind of thing of a little bit older. Um, there are more modern religions, and I'm sure it'll stay, but I wonder if some of that is not dissolving, but we're kind of stepping each generation a little bit away from the religious age, the Piscean. How do I think about it? I don't know. Do you think there's something to that?
Absolutely. I think so, because what I usually do is I take a word and go back to the origin, right? I want to understand in depth what it means. So
How
when you
about
look so when you look up religion, it's obviously from Latin, and it means redoing by rethinking. That's
no?
all what it means.
That's what religion means? Wow, that gives a whole different, that's like the original scientist was trying to find God, not disconnect from it, you know?
Yeah,
Wow. Oh,
that's what
that's
religion
cool.
really means. And so
Mm.
every religion there is was someone behind it rethinking something and redoing it, right? So basically when you look at the Bible, I mean, it's funny enough to me, it's like there's so many different versions of the Bible, right? For instance, the Old Testament covers a lot more books than the New Testament. And also the Bible is not an original book. It's pieces and bits and from all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
was one
yeah, yeah.
individual who translated it, and it wasn't objective at all. It was all subjective, it was all this narrow view.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it was just marketing, you know let's go back to marketing. Right? Who was
Yes, you
marketing
talk
the
about
best?
marketing. There it is. That's a big one. It wouldn't have spread on its own as big as it did. No, there is an agenda there. Wow.
Totally. There is. So for me, it's like religion or making sure. And also, when I was young, I challenged witness Jehovah people who come to the door. There was no internet with scam emails, so they would come to the door. And then my mom was like, "Oh, come, you talk to these people. I don't want to talk to them." And I was like 14 or 12, I don't know, around that, teenager. And so they came, and I was like, okay, first question. Why you always go to people who are in a bad space? There is an agenda behind it. And they looked at me, it's like, what do you mean? I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. You always go to people where are struggling, just been through a loss, or there's something else going on in their life. and you get them and then you hold on to them and then you take all their money. Why is that in the name of God? They didn't answer my question. They left. So it's like, okay, there's my answer.
That's the Aquarian in us. We're like, yeah, come in, come in. Let me tell you something about God, okay? You're in my house now.
Yeah. So I think as the religion will become, how should I say, less religious. It's like they will have to open up.
Or that original, the rethinking of it. I really
Yeah.
love that. I've never heard that, and that shifts it all for me, because we often think of religion today as like the opposite, locked in, right?
Mhm.
And even like star seeds become religious. It's hilarious and like so close-minded, and it has to be this way and that. But I love what you said. Let's come back to the origins. It's to rethink, to be
Mhm.
open. But also there's something in that definition that also shows intelligence, and again, that discernment, right?
Sermon, absolutely. And I
Wow.
mean, that's when you read the Bible. I mean, I read the Bible as more as an entertainment, and see where I mean, there's good stuff in the Bible, I mean, absolutely, and helpful, and teachings are in there, right? But again, it's like use it with discernment. But the way I see it is really, it will dissolve into a good book to read, right?
Interesting.
So it's really like it should be. I think every person should read it. So I didn't make my kids read it, but I recommended it to them, because there's a lot of scientific information in there too. It's not just, there's a lot of science in there, which just has been, the wording is complicated. They made, obviously it's from an old language, but if you read between the lines, there's a lot of science in there.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, a lot of.
I remember there was one point where it's like, I got to read this thing. So I started the Old Testament, started reading it all the way through. I'd read the New Testament a few times. Like, when you really read that whole thing, like, it almost raises more questions than it does
Right?
answers.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, hold on, what? And then also there's so much context that has to go with it. And this is what I found when I was studying the old like Confucius text, because I'd sit with the masters and they'd tell me an hour-long story about one character or one part of the meaning that isn't in there, that's part of the bigger, and context is helpful for this. And then you realize, like, well, the Bible says a lot of things we know it does. It says a lot of things we didn't know it does. And then there's this whole realm of in between. And then there's the other texts that weren't included. And then there's the origin of where many of those teachings, I'm sure you've seen, like, so many things in the Bible were just a passing on of older stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then there's other texts like A Course in Miracles, A Course in Love. I've got Way of Mastery over there. Like I said, the Yogananda texts. There's a lot of more encompassing, and I like what you said. We kind of all have a perspective, like the wedge, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's fascinating when we talk about channeling, how many people on our planet have felt a connection to Jesus or to the Christ energy, and that shifted them, and that's a tangible thing. And so I think maybe we shouldn't forget some of the mysticism and magic that has come through that as well for people. And I was really surprised when I had some time in evangelical churches that I was like, wow, I realized I judged a lot of people that I would pass on the street and think, you're not open, you're not this. And then I see them in church crying, listening to spiritual music. And I'm like, oh man, I was wrong. And it just shows that there's also levels of connecting spiritual into things. And sometimes you got to meet people at different levels. But that was actually humbling for me. And I think that, I don't know, in all of this, there's a way of just really, again, coming back to where people, how do we help them go from where they are to the next level of open? And how do we humble ourselves when we're stuck in the process too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your favorite quote from the Bible or Jesus? And then I want to share mine with you. If you could
Good
pick
one.
off the top, or just a top one comes to mind.
You got me here. Oh my God. I can't.
I can share one that
Share
comes
yours.
up
Yeah.
to me. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but one of my favorite all time is where two are gathered in my name, there am I, there is my church. It's paraphrasing a little bit, but the reason I love that is because it shows like where two beings come together. There, that's where I am. This is where the love is. This is where the Christ, this is where the connection is. And so it just comes back again to how beautiful relationships are and our opportunity to connect with each other in these times.
That is
But
beautiful.
I love that one. And people used to ask me like, hey, what church do you go to? Do you go to church? I'm like, you're in my church now, brother. You were right here with me and the Holy Spirit. Hallelujah, baby. Let's get it on. So,
That's the other thing, right? You don't need to go to church to be close to Jesus or God, right? That it's always with us, it's
but I
in
do
us.
think I do think that community and regular exposure, like you said, reading and these things, I do think it serves a benefit. Maybe we don't need it and in that structure, but there is something beneficial about repetition and exposure, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, I love to go into church, to churches.
Oh yeah.
To sit in quiet, but not for a mess or something. So I would just go when, the door is open, but there's no service going on. And then I just go in there and sit there and meditate. Because what I love about it, I think, and that's beautiful about churches, is people go in there vulnerable with good intention and a certain positivity. Even, when you have funeral services, people go in there vulnerable. They are authentic in that moment. And I think that's the energy I love in churches, because that you can feel, right? And that's why, but I would never go for service anymore, because I believe like I would like just push to whoever is up there, push away. It's like, let me talk. What are you talking about?
It's funny you mentioned that. My partner she just went to Easter service, right? If you're watching, we just passed the Easter time or coming into it with the Eastern Orthodox, but and she really wanted to go to Mass because she has a connection to it. She was brought up more in that Catholic community. And she's like, I found myself having to live interpret, like he'd say this and that. She's like, well, not really. So it's like there was kind of both like the dissonance and that. You and me are the same. I love churches when they're empty and I could just go in and meditate, because the thing is like stone, it holds frequency. And as we know, like some of the more advanced high frequency technologies look like stone to us, right? And so the power of churches and building those architectures, and I love the beings right now that are like their vision. You ask like, what's your passion vision? Theirs are building these new age temples. Like my godfather is a shaman in the jungles of Mexico, and they've built these beautiful temples by hand that just rise up out of the jungle, and people that are building geometric and advanced stuff. And I think over the next decade and two, we're going to see even more of these like structures come out. And there is something about the organics and the energy and the again and the again. So I'm really excited to see what comes of the next few years and decades of like, I don't want to call them the New Earth churches, but sure, let's trademark New Earth Church, right? This like high vibe place that'll hold the energy, that'll keep it in, that'll keep it geometric, but it's also with the highest prayers and not about corrupting or controlling the people. There really is a beauty to that. And I think as we shift out of this digital a little bit and start coming together more, I have a lot of appreciation for people like yourself that are called to set up centers and places that can hold and contain that energy, because we can only hold so much in our human psyche field, right? Like we could only hold so much. So having community, having structures, these things can help sustain and keep. So there is a technology to the church, right? There is a technology that's really powerful. Back to the
They
pure.
have this. I mean, the Fibonacci sequence is in every church, I think, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's there. The golden ratio. It's in every church, right?
So interesting, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So out. So we're getting, oh wow, it's nearly 1 hour 40 minutes. There's a last topic I would like to touch on with you. It's
Okay.
astral traveling.
Yeah. Ooh,
Have
okay.
you, so have, have you have experiences with it? And if yes, can you give people maybe advice how to do that in a safe way? Or is there a certain, routine you're going through that, the astral traveling really happens and you have a positive experience?
Wow. So, okay. Such a good question because yeah, I have had some various experiences at different times with this. So the one I would suggest overall, and this kind of comes back to everything, is like your connection to source, your connection to the state of love, your spiritual cultivation, so that like if you're someone who's triggered a lot in life and things are triggering you and you shift into these other states and your reaction to things is like this, there's actually like a correlation between your trigger ability here and another state. So in my process, there were times where like I might have shortcutted a little bit and learned the techniques and started traveling and journeying. And like I said, at different times, it might have involved plant medicine. So that opens up whole nother doors. I love what the Yoga Sutras say about it. Like the plant medicines might help you get there, but you don't remember the steps. You can't replicate, oh, how do I open this again, right? So one, that it could take time to just be patient with it and to realize that like it's part of a bigger thing, that the more you can cultivate your overarching love, get the affairs of your physical life in order, and the relationships and your connection, I don't want to say God or source, but all of these, and like smooth out some of your rough edges, that the astral travel, I think, will one be less likely to get steered in a dangerous direction or terrifying direction.
Yeah.
Had some of those experiences, not my favorite. You might need some help, right? If that becomes the case, but and steer you towards the love, but also in a way that I think when you're first exploring, like you're like I did a lot of my work with this in the jungles of Mexico, like I said, and in the cenotes, and seeing journeys with eagles and pink dolphins under the waters and all these things. It's beautiful and it's awesome, but there's also a tendency to get a little woo-woo, like you're living in these fantastical realms, but have they integrated? So the advice I never would have followed when I was younger, but I would give again to my younger self anyways, is brother man, like sisterhood, integrate everything in your life. So as you're going off and astraling, also are you bringing that in, and how is that weaving into your practical? And when you could use these astral realms to help you navigate what's actually coming up, like, okay, hey, there's this emotion I'm having, there's this reaction, there's this limitation, this fear, this whatever it is, like you could journey into that. And you could journey into that in other realms and bring in the guides and the astral exploration of these things that might be maybe more tangibly beneficial. Now, I'm not saying like hopping out to the stars and doing these other activations and things can be beneficial, but in my old wise age, I'm kidding, but just become more practical in integrating these things. But I think there's also something to be said for sometimes we just want to get our hands on it, right? So doing some astral training where it's almost the opposite of meditation. The imagination is important, the trust, the flowing, the like trusting the imagination, eliminating the questioning mind, because you need discernment, but maybe the discernment is before and after you come back and you assess everything. If you're trying to discern during the journey, it's going to totally interrupt. So getting comfortable being able to go on a journey, being able to astrally, remote viewing, I got really into that for a while, and like it's fascinating what's possible. So there might be an instance of like, I just want to learn how to ride this bike. I don't care where I'm going to practically take my bicycle, and I actually support that. Like develop some of the skills, abilities, but also like um, cultivate those hearts. I've had some experiences of ending up in situations that were quite terrifying and like jolting, and that's been dissolved and addressed by me just working on my own inner stuff and cultivation and This is, again, I love this text, A Course in Miracles, because it can help folks be able to sustain a state and a connection to like divine source love. So anything that'll help you connect to divine source is going to help your journey in the in-betweens.
Absolutely.
That's my thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. So where can people reach you, Zach? Apart from YouTube, right?
Just close your eyes, go into your heart, and you're going to see my big smiley face. So all the branding stuff, again, the name I use is Zach Sacbe, that's Z-A-C. Sacbe is a Mayan word, meaning the white path that represented the Milky Ways, the path they traveled on. It was a name that was given to me. That's S-A-C-B-E. But you can find all my work on Xoltal.com. Again, another Mayan word, Xoltal. It means reverence, bowing, the harmony. And so Xoltal sounds like Xoltal, but the X is an S. So Xoltal.com. And then you can find me on all of the social media through that, the Xoltal, whether on YouTube.
Make sure you send that to me so I can put it in.
I'll give you all the links. And what I tell people is, hey, if this has resonated, if something in you is like, I want to connect, let me really encourage you. I want to connect with you too. If this is feeling like, and you're like, whoa, this guy, I just got to talk to him, or I just got to message him, or like, I got to book a session. Like, let me give you 1,000% push and nudge to go do it. And if it doesn't resonate, then cool, maybe like check out a video, or keep scrolling, keep watching your stuff. But if it does, I would love to connect and encourage that connection as well, because I also want to reach out to more people and connect with more beings, not just because of like the channeling work I'm doing, but like I said, that bigger blueprint, the bigger vision. We could all use more connection in our lives. And so that's where they can find me. And again, I do channeling work, healing work, kind of coaching, motivational, that kind of stuff, the whole gambit.
I had such a great time, Zach.
Thank
you so much. I feel honored that you reached out to us, because we're such a small channel, but for me, it's not about the number. It's really building that new light grid for humanity. And even if it's just, a few people here, they're going to take that, right? And they're going to take it and run with that. It doesn't have to come from us, but it's beautiful to just on this. We started like last November, and what kind of people reach out, and it's so beautiful to see all these light workers, popping up everywhere,
Well, thank you for being a part of it, and those who are building their social media preference. Your subscribers and your likes, they don't show you how many connections you make and how that's going to spread. And I found you through Sid, and I'm like, oh wow, this is cool. And I am thoroughly, like, I feel so much love from you, and warmth, and mother energy, and like earth energy. And so I've really enjoyed this. I've had a great time. I know we've gone on for quite a while here, but I'm glad we did. And to anybody who's listened, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did too. And again, sister, like Drew, glad we've connected, and hope we can stay connected going forward.
We definitely. So
we're definitely working on the same thing.
I expect you on my healing center, that's for sure.
Yes, ma'am. That'll be great. I look forward to it. Yes. And I'm actually in Connecticut at the moment, so I'm kind of close to upstate New York.
You're in Connecticut?
Yeah, I didn't expect it, but I'm in Stamford at the moment, kind of close to New York City. But
yeah. Well, I worked in the banking industry. Guess where I was? In Stamford, UBS. That's where I used to be.
That's literally 2 blocks from here.
Oh my God.
It's crazy. Look how small it's not small. It's interconnected. It's a huge
interconnected, right?
Very interconnected.
That's
wow.
Crazy.
That is such a funny synchronicity. That is
so soon the mandate is for vaccination is lifted. Hopefully they keep to the 11th of May now. Then I can finally get into your country. But right now I'm kind of like stuck here, and I've refused to give in to this. I hope I stand up for myself, and I'm not going to do it.
I really do feel that we're going to evolve past some of these things, and
right.
that I'm welcome to it come in soon. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just read between the lines, folks, but that's what I'll say.
Yes. Yeah, so everyone, thank you for listening, watching us, and please reach out to Zach. And if you want to be on the podcast, email us. Everything's going to be down in the description box. And just stay on for a minute. I'm going to finish and then I just want to.
Thank you again. Love you, Soul Fam.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye.